And so then, of course, following on from medical care, we can't help but think about medical insurance and how do you pay for that care. And here is where I know you guys have a what will seem maybe shocking to a number of people listening to this, American retirees, our strategy for how you handle and how you've approached health insurance or covering the cost of healthcare these past 40 years.
Yeah, so we have Medicare in the US, and outside the US, we just pay out of pocket.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kathleen Petticord. I'm the president and founding publisher of Live and Invest Overseas. I would like to welcome the couple that smart money called the George and Martha Washington of retiring overseas. And that is Paul and Vicki Terhorst, who are settling in and getting comfortable for a chat to share their, at this point, very extended story. So Paul and Vicki, welcome. And you are joining us today from Kotor, Montenegro, I think. You have been retired overseas long before you reached retirement age and long before retiring overseas was a thing, before anybody really was talking about retiring overseas. I think you started down this path about 40 years ago. Is that right?
Yes, 1984.
Okay, so a little more than 40 years ago, and you were the ripe old age of 35, I think.
Right.
And I think you're probably at this stage, you've told this story so many times, you're probably not excited about telling the backstory, but I'm going to ask if you would please, because I'm sure there are people who are going to be listening to this who don't know your backstory. And it is remarkable because I've been covering this beat for as well 40 years. I started in 1985 reporting on this idea. And so I know back then this was a fringy, crazy idea. Nobody did this. Nobody had this idea. And the other thing I like to point out for people today is to recognize that this was long pre-internet, pre-app. This was when this idea was not only fringy and unheard of and pioneering, but also really hard.
Yeah, it was a little bit hard to begin with, but it got easier pretty quickly. A couple of things happened right away in 1984 was airline deregulation and ATMs and debit cards, or cash cards we call them today. Both
Right.
of both of those things bailed us out. Yeah, and we had to, credit cards were used widely, but we still had to have cash for a lot of things. So but anyhow, we were living in Argentina. We were living in Buenos Aires, and we had a small apartment that we used as a pied a terre, and we decided in 1984 we decided to move into it, and that's the whole story right off the bat. And we got rid of the apartment some years later, and we've been pretty much, with one exception, we've been pretty much running around the world ever since.
And so you were living where in the States when you decided to go to Buenos Aires full time?
Well, we're living in San Francisco, and we were transferred to Buenos Aires when I was still working, and then we stuck around. I decided to retire or leave my job. I mean, I was only 35, so retirement wasn't a very good word, but I couldn't think of any other word, so that's what we called it.
Exactly. There was no word for it. Today they might call you a digital nomad. I don't know. But what the word that we did use to describe you, Paul and I and Vicki and I have known each other now for decades. And I've often referred to you, and I think you guys to yourselves, as perpetual travelers, because you haven't based yourself anywhere except with a couple of exceptions that I want to talk about in a few minutes. But I remember you telling me years ago, Paul, and I thought this was such a charming and also telling way to answer the question, why in the world did you do this way back in 1984? And you told me you realized you were on a different bus. So you weren't on the same bus as the rest of everybody, and you had the courage. I mean, it was quite a leap. And Vicki, that you went along for the ride.
Right. Yeah, we had a great life, but we were living in Argentina, and we loved living overseas. I mean, I can't tell you how much fun we had living overseas. And the company wanted to move Paul back to the US. And we said, well, maybe we should look at some alternatives. And we looked to transfer to another country. But when push came to shove, we realized we had plenty of money to live simply. And Argentina was very cheap at the time, that we didn't actually need to work.
Well, I'd
So,
like to dig into that if you don't mind. And you have written about this extensively, so I don't think I'm being indiscreet by asking about the financial aspects of this. So at the age of 35, you realized you had enough money to live on. How much money was that? How much did you decide was enough?
We had $500,000 in cash, essentially in CDs that were paying at the time about 20% interest, a little bit less. So we were looking at about $100,000 of income every year, and our expenses. Remember, this was a long time ago. Our expenses were less than $20,000 a year. Our expenses
Right.
were yeah. So we had our expenses covered 5 times, and we thought, well, that's. And so we set a goal for ourselves that $500,000 should increase every year by inflation.
And
And we
has that worked out like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so we figured as long as we could increase it by inflation every year, we could do this indefinitely, which is the whole idea. And so that's the way we got started. Now, later on, when interest rates fell sharply, we switched to other investments, things like bonds and stocks. And now we're virtually all in stocks
and
a-
cash.
and
Okay.
cash. And so, and yes, we when we were still using CDs and interest rates, we had no problem. Like I said, we had no problem increasing our net worth by inflation because we had such a huge difference between what was coming in and what was going out. And that difference varied over the years. And again, interest rates fell, so we had to change our portfolio. But now we're home free.
Right. And so with everything how worried are you with everything going on with the stock market lately? All the volatility. I mean, it's the word of the day, uncertainty. Has that impacted how you guys live or your budget or how you approach what you're going to do next?
No, the stock market crashed in 2001. It crashed in 2000, 2001, 2008, 2014, 2021.
So we've been around the block.
So here you are still. Exactly. This is great perspective. This is why it's so, I think, so valuable to speak to you all, because I know a lot of readers are very worried about what's going on in the financial climate. But you guys are here living proof. Hey, we've been around this block a number of times. And here we are still living the life of our dreams, the dream we had more than 40 years ago. And you've made it work. And I think in some of your writings for us and others, you've made the point that because I'm thinking of healthcare in particular and practical aspects of this, and your mention of Asia, that you have doctors who have become, kind of your doctors, and they're in Thailand, which might seem remarkable to the average American retiree, that you have there. That's where you found the doctors you trust the most and now have a history and a connection with.
So let me take that a little bit further, if you don't mind.
Yes.
Uh, we find doctors we trust everywhere. A couple of years ago, actually now 3 years ago, I had a medical emergency in Mexico. We were living in Querétaro, Mexico for the pandemic, and I had a medical emergency. And I got the most phenomenal medical care. Now, we didn't know really anyone. And we were directed by a lab and by a dermatologist that I had seen of how to find a good hematologist. I had a blood problem. And we were just thrilled with the great medical care. And I ended up with a super doctor. So how I feel is wherever you are, you are almost always going to find good medical care.
That's a great insight because, of course, that's a number one concern and fear for, I think, the average American retiree probably has trouble processing the idea that medical care outside the United States can be as good or even better than the care that they're accessing in their homes. city or state. And so then, of course, following on from medical care, we can't help but think about medical insurance and how do you pay for that care. And here is where I know you guys have a what will seem maybe shocking to a number of people listening to this, American retirees, our strategy for how you handle and how you've approached health insurance or covering the cost of healthcare these past 40 years.
Yeah, so we have Medicare in the US, and outside the US, we just pay out of pocket.
So you've had, until you were eligible for Medicare, you had nothing.
We had nothing anywhere except for the first few years in Buenos Aires, and then when we left Buenos Aires, we had a plan with a local hospital, and that I was a director of, and of course, when we left Buenos Aires, that plan lapsed, and so we had no insurance anywhere. And now, if we go visit the United States and have a incident, we could use Medicare, but in fact, we never have used it.
Uh,
except for COVID.
uh, Fair enough.
One thing I wanted to mention is now that we're older, many of our friends also have Medicare, and they live around the world, and lots of times they need surgery or they need this or that, and they can fly to the US and get it done for free or nearly free on Medicare, or they can pay out of top pocket and get it done in Thailand or Mexico or wherever they are. And so the calculation is you go to the US and Medicare pays most of it, but you also have to fly up there and then stay in a hotel up there, and you
Mhm.
have to go up for the preliminary trip, and then you have to go up for a secondary trip, and then you have to have somebody come with you and take care of you, and on and on. Whereas if you stay, let's use Mexico as the example. If you stay in Mexico and you pay out of pocket, you're going to pay so much. And in every case that we know that we're personally familiar with, 4 or 5 of them, they've all decided to go ahead and pay out of pocket in the host country, Mexico, and have the benefits of staying home and not having the trauma of the travel and the hotels and all that.
Right, right. No, it's a great point. And so I guess, right, the couple of big takeaways are that the standard of care can be as good or better, and that you can find good care really for the most part, anywhere in the world, except very remote regions. But that would be true in the United States as well, in very remote regions. Is there anything else you'd like to share with people who might be considering this idea, or just anyone who is thinking about retiring overseas in general, maybe not in the way that you have, but in general? What would your words of wisdom be at this stage?
Well, one of the things you said earlier was that you have more control. And I think we don't have control of our life. We think we have control, but all kinds of surprises. I do a lot of support for friends and stuff who are going through life crises. And the point is after 70, your life is full of surprises. There's things that you just weren't
Mm,
counting, and they happen. And so I think it's a matter of thinking I'm not in control.
right.
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to plan the best life I can plan, and I'm going to enjoy it, but I'm going to be ready also for those surprises to happen. And when those surprises happen, I'm going to realize that I can make it work for me.
Well, I guess to embrace surprise, if
Yeah,
you can get to the point where you're not afraid of it or worried about the unexpected, but you embrace that as part of the adventure.
happen.
Yeah.
That's going to happen. So I would, yeah, embrace the surprise. I love that, Kathleen.
All right. So you guys are in Kotor, Montenegro, which I know is a really charming place to be and a lovely time of year to be there. How much longer are you in Kotor?
Just a few more days. Some friends are showing up and are driving down here from Budapest and showing up in an hour or so. So we're going to go over there and
Ah,
have
okay. Well, that's
have
a
dinner
good
with them.
segue. I think we've had a great conversation, and I really appreciate your time. And I will let you go to meet your friends from Budapest. But thank you so much. I think you guys are a real inspiration for all. You have really blazed a trail that today is not only not crazy, but it's increasingly mainstream. I mean, CNN, CBS, there are running regular features, regular stories about the best places for Americans to retire overseas, what this lifestyle can look like, how to plan for a retirement overseas. And even 10 years ago, it would have been crazy to imagine CBS doing a series of articles or features on television about that. But you guys are an inspiration, and you show people who are considering the idea now the huge upside. You're just a picture of the ultimate upsides and benefits and advantages of taking the leap of faith. So thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of your time in KOTOR, and I'll talk to you all again soon. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation with Paul and Vicki as much as I have. I will be back next month with another special guest to speak from another perspective on this idea of being retired overseas. Thank you very much. We'll be in touch again soon.